So while you guys are working on your Parthenon, I noticed a couple things that I just want to kind of share with everyone. And one of the big things that we have to do as sculptors, if you will, is to remember the important idea of proportion. Now, real quick, what is proportion? Can anyone define what proportion is? I like your hand signals there. Yeah, bigger, smaller, all right, all that jazz.
Size being right in accordance to other sizes.
Bingo. And I think the important part of that sentence is the relationship to other objects in the scene. Now, one of our big responsibilities as we're making these shapes, I know this is going to sound strange, is to look critically at what we're building. We make one thing, and then when we make the second, we have to really examine and understand how big or small that object is to the first thing that we've just created. Let's take a look. I'll tell you what I'm talking about. All right, so here we go. I'm going to simply draw a couple rectangles. This is going to be my pretend foundation of my little Parthenon, okay? Now, I need to be a good 3D modeler, okay? And oftentimes, when we start to draw our shapes, we draw it away from the origin of the scene. Now, real quick, what is the origin of the scene? 0, 0, 0. So in every sense, it's the center of our universe. We need to be good 3D modelers and ensure that all of our objects are being generated at the origin. Why? I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. Does anyone remember why the origin is so important? This is the one known landmark, right? Remember, we're in this infinite void. It really is infinite. I remember a couple semesters ago, someone said, hey, how big is the 3D viewport in Modo? And I went, I don't know. Let's figure out, right? So we made a scale model of our solar system. So we made all the planets to the appropriate size, and we positioned them to their appropriate distances, because all that stuff is very easily found on NASA's website, right? And so we made a scale model of our solar system, and guess what? Modo could do it. So it really is an infinite 3D space. In an infinite 3D space, we need to have some landmarks to help us keep our bearings. The origin is one of those landmarks. It's the grand common denominator between all 3D scenes. Doesn't matter if you're working in Modo or in Maya, Cinema 4D, what have you, or even a game engine for that matter. Everyone understands the role of the origin. There's always a center point. In addition, it also allows us to open up some tools and some workflows that make our life a whole lot easier. And it can act as a beautiful, beautiful alignment guide going forward. So I want to get my model at the origin of the scene. Okay, now let's pretend that I just drew that shape way out over there. And if you look very, very carefully, of course, at the intersection of the red and blue line is the origin. So I want the foundation for my mesh to show up there. Now, I could easily just, manually kind of white knuckle it over there. Just kind of grab it, move it over, and that's close. But Pat doesn't do close. I want exact, okay? I want precision. So check it out. With my cube selected, I can cruise over to my basic toolbar, and we have this wonderful option here called Center Selected. And as one might imagine, what do you think that's going to do? Yeah, it's going to take the selected geometry and physically move it to the origin of the scene. Check it out. It's a pull-down menu. We can do any combinations. We can do single axes, or we can have the computer move all three, or move this object to the center of all three axes in our 3D space. Boop. And it automatically does it for us, which is pretty great. Okay? All right. So now that I got my foundation kind of situated, let's talk about duplication, because I want a couple of these things. Okay? I want to have maybe a small, simple little staircase up to the main floor of the Parthenon. Now, as I was walking around, a couple of you guys had a great question of how do I duplicate objects inside the scene? And there's a couple different ways. The easiest way to do this, okay? If you just need to make 1 or 2 copies, here's the simple way if I didn't touch base with you. Of course, naturally, we have to select the object that we want to duplicate. In this case, I'm going to double-click on my cube and then roll over to the top of the screen under the Edit pull-down menu. And what we're going to do is copy that geometry, and then once again, very quickly return to the Paste dialog in that exact same menu. Now we've got to be careful in here because ultimately what we are doing is that we're copying some polygons and then we're pasting them back into the scene, but in the exact same location as its originator, okay? So once we paste, the next thing that we got to do is fire off the move tool or the rotate or scale, a transform tool, and now I can pull open a duplicate, okay? That's pretty cool. Now let me zip over to the front here and just move this shape down so that it's roughly kind of where I want it to go. So I have two cubes that are stacked on top of each other, and I want to make the second one a little bit smaller, so I'm going to leverage the power of the scale tool. However, the scale tool has a couple little landmines that, if we're not careful, things can go wrong pretty quickly when using the scale tool. Now I want to make this the second guy a little smaller than the first one, right? So what could I do? Yeah, so the initial reaction is, hey, I'll do this. I'll click on the little circle in the middle, because as we know from last week, this is going to scale it on all three axes. Yeah, and that's the problem. If we do it this way, yeah, we're going to be able to scale it down, but we're also changing the height of it as well. If you look over here, there's now a small gap in between my two shapes. That's because we're scaling this cube along the x, y, and z axes simultaneously. So yeah, it's making it smaller this way, but it's also making it smaller this way too. Okay, check it out. We have an alternative here. Let me zoom out and hit undo. And then make it bigger. And our alternative, see if I can make it big. There we go. Our alternative are these little discs. These little discs are called coplanar handles, and they allow us to scale the shape along two out of the three axes at the same time. Because I don't want to scale it along the y-axis, I just want to scale it along the x and the z. So the way this works, and it kind of confused me the first couple times that I was working with it, is that the disc that we choose is not going to be scaled. Yeah, so if I only wanted to scale along the red and the blue, which one of those three discs would I choose? The green one. You got it, absolutely. So it's the axis that is not going to be manipulated. So I'm going to grab that one. And we're going to get something very similar to what we had before. Let me zoom out so you guys can see the product of this operation. There we go. Cool, huh? Now, those coplanar handles are pretty neat, and I like it. And because I didn't scale that cube along the y-axis, it's the exact same height as the other. All right, so this is starting to look pretty great. Let's continue our conversation about simple duplication by making a handy-dandy little column. Okay. Now these columns, of course, are going to be created with the cylinder tool. Okay. I'm just going to make me a little cylinder. Let me return it to the default so it looks like yours. Okay. All right, so that is a gigantic column. So what could I do very quickly to start to scale it down to get it to the appropriate size? So we could just use the regular scale tool and grab on the uniform scale indicator, the center circle, and I can say, well, that's about the diameter that I want. And then I'd have to scale it up to get it to the height that I want. Okay. That's all well and good. Let me show you an alternative, okay? Perhaps this is the height that I want. Let's actually position it inside the temple. Let's pretend for a second that this is the height that I want. It's just the wrong diameter. Let's get it in there. Well, if I fire off the scale tool, this is where the coplanar handles really begin to shine. Because now I can just reduce the diameter by clicking on the green coplanar handle, which will scale this cylinder along the x and the z simultaneously. See how the height is not changing? The diameter is? That's pretty cool. One other thing, and I want you to look at your meshes and be very mindful of how the structure of your cylinders are being created. And I'm going to hit undo because it's a little bit easier to see when it's a big daddy one like this. Okay? So check it out. If you notice very carefully here, of course, I got a cool looking cylinder. It's got 24 sides going around it. However, we also have a whole series of vertical edge loops, these spans. Okay? Now these are cool But generally, when we're trying to block out a model, we want to work with as few spans as possible. Because perhaps my art director comes in and says, Pat, I love what you're doing here, but the columns are just way too short. We need to make them taller. Okay? Now, right now, making this object taller is not impossible, or let's say maybe he wants it smaller, shorter instead of taller. Now, that's not impossible to make something smaller or shorter, but watch what happens in its current form. My inclination is to grab that top polygon, fire off the move tool, but watch what happens to the top of my cylinder when it intersects that edge span that's below it. Yeah, crazy, huh? And it clicked out because it was all zoomed in. See how it doesn't actually make the cylinder smaller? I can make it bigger, but I really can't make it smaller, okay? These vertical edge spans generally get in the way. There are many, 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 many ways that we can very quickly and easily add those edge spans or edge loops into the model. Here's my suggestion, because it makes working with the cylinder tool a whole lot easier. Create your cylinders initially without them. Okay? Let me show you what I'm talking about. Once again, I'll return to my cylinder tool. And this time, however, I'm going to return to my tool options and change my segments from 12 to 1. Okay? Watch how the tool behaves now. I can still make a circle, but now we don't have any of those vertical edge loops going across the height of the cylinder. That's exactly what I want. Okay? Because now I'm free to place this wherever I need it to go. Let's put it on the top of my temple here. Get it into position. Change the diameter using the coplanar handles on the scale tool. And if my art director wants it to be taller or smaller, I could simply grab that top polygon, activate the move tool, and now I'm free to do whatever kind of edit operation I want, because those other vertical edge loops on the model are not restricting the movement of that top polygon. It makes the cylinder incredibly flexible, which is pretty rad. Okay? I'm sorry, say again?
What's the original point then? Like, why, if you're taking it down to 1, like, what can you do with it because it was at 12 before?
If you wanted to bend and deform a cylinder into like a U shape, then you're going to need to have a lot of those edge spans in there. Yep. You'll see as our skill and our experience continues to grow, the purpose of having a lot of geometry in a small amount of space is. I guess the takeaway is that it's really, really easy to add those vertical edge spans, the edge loops. It's kind of a pain to delete them after they've already been created. It's a lot of clicking they got to do, right? Okay. All right. So, duplication. There's some other duplication tools inside of Modo. Some of you stumbled upon the Duplicate Tool tab over in your toolbar. And I want to show you something that may be pretty helpful for both your homework and the conclusion of your lab this week. Now, let's pretend that I need to have a whole lot of these little columns cruising down the outside of my temple here. Okay? Now, I could certainly do copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste a half a dozen times to get everything that I want. That's cool. However, one of the things and one of the big problems with copy, paste is that, I'm just going to do it real fast, Command-C to copy, Command-V to paste. I'm going to hit the W key tool to fire off the move tool. And now I've got a couple. Now, one of the big problems is that I'm pretty much in control of this operation here. And I get to determine the spacing in between all of my duplicates. That's, once again, that's okay, but I like precision. I want all of my duplicates to be exactly the same distance from one another. So let's do this. Once again, I'm going to fire off a selection. However, this time, check it out. I'm going to go over into my duplication collection of tools, this guy right here. Now, we're going to have a lot of conversations about the duplication tools, but I just want to introduce one to you so that at the very least you have some power that you can use for your homework and the conclusion of your lab this week. And specifically, we're going to talk about the clone tool, this guy down here at the bottom of the screen. Pay real close attention to the icons. The icons do a really great job of defining kind of the outcome of what each of these tools is going to do. With that said, what would you imagine the purpose of the outcome of the clone tool is going to be? Yeah, it's going to make a whole bunch of duplicates in a straight line. Okay? The clone tool is only going to make duplicates in a straight line. Check it out. Let's do it. So I got my first cylinder selected. I'll activate my clone tool by clicking on the tool icon. And then, to apply the tool to my scene, check it out. I'm simply just going to left click once. I'm going to get some tool handles. Now, if I drag along the tool handle, dun, 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 there it is. Isn't that cool? There is a duplicate. Now, one, that's okay. That's pretty neat. However, returning to the tool option shows us the number of clones that we can ask the tool to create. Increasing this value would naturally increase the number of clones that are going to be generated. And each of these clones is honoring the spacing that I initially and interactively set a moment ago when I was dragging on the tool handles. And FYI, this tool is still live, so if I wanted to change the spacing, I certainly could. And now they're all evenly distributed along that row, which is pretty cool. So I can just increase the number of clones. Oops, I went the wrong way. There we go. Something like that. Something about 7. Handy dandy, and I'm on my way. Cool, huh? Now there's some other powerful features found inside the clone tool options, and these are kind of fun. So each one of these duplicates can be adjusted. Okay? If we return back to our tool options, maybe I want each duplicate to be a little bit smaller than this previous duplicate. Well, I can do that by going in, and let's just do like 75%. Now each copy is going to be 75% of the size of the one that came before it. So you get this cool little stair-step thing, which is kind of fun. Okay? In addition, if you keep cruising down through your tool options, we have this rotation. We can rotate each one of our copies. Let's do it like, I don't know. Let's see. Let's do it 15 degrees along the x-axis. Yeah, there we go. Now, each time it clones it, it's rotating it 15 degrees from the previous clone, right? That's kind of cool. I like that. So there's a lot of power inside the clone tool, but there's one option that I absolutely need to make sure that you guys see, and I'm just going to go back in time. Let's reactivate the tool, and I want to put my number of clones back down to 1. Now, oftentimes, we don't really know what the offset value, the spacing in between the clones needs to be to really accurately populate like the side of the wall, okay? There's one option that will help us that I love, and this is, I wish every single duplication system had this option, and it's called between. Check it out. Notice that my number of clones is set to 1. Let's activate between, and then I'll apply the tool to my scene by simply left-clicking inside of my 3D viewport. Now what I'm trying to do is not to determine the distance between the first clone and the second clone. I need to go in and determine the distance between the first and the last column in my row. Check it out. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to use my move handle to tell the computer where to stop duplicating. Okay? That looks pretty cool. And then when I increase the number of duplicates in the clones, watch what it does. It puts it in between the first one and the last one. Isn't that cool? And now we can have the computer figure out the spacing for us. Okay? I'm a big fan of these thinking machines that sit in front of us. They do a lot of heavy lifting for us, which if we let them. These tool properties provide us with a tremendous amount of power and for us to leverage. Coolio, huh? Yeah, the clone tools are really, 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 really handy. Okay? If you find yourself doing the exact same thing over and over and over again, that's a perfect opportunity for the computer to come in and help you out a little bit. Okay? All right, questions on that stuff? Now, yes, sir, go ahead.
What if you want to rotate them all at once? Would that allow it?
Yeah, so if you want to rotate them all at once, okay, of course, naturally, we're going to have to select them all. And I'm holding down the Shift key while I double-click on each one of my columns. And then activating the Rotate tool will give us that ability.
All right. Thank you.
One thing about the Rotate tool that someone asked, how can I rotate with accuracy? What if I wanted to rotate all of those columns 90 degrees along the red handle, around the red axis? Well, there's a couple different ways that we can do this. First and foremost, we have to understand specifically which axes we're rotating around. And for me, I want to rotate it around the red guy here. What axis is that? X. You got it. Good. So I need to rotate it 90 degrees around the red axis. So I'll just type in 90 here, and when I hit the return key on my keyboard, it rotates at 90, which is pretty cool. Now that's neat, I like that, but it takes me away from what I call the area of interest inside the 3D scene. Once you get really comfortable and really strong with your modeling tools and your workflow, you're not going to want to be taken away from the area that you're working in, right? It's like, have you guys ever, done like a home improvement project or something? I joke around and say it with my wife, it's like all home improvement projects at my house require at least 4 trips to Home Depot, right? Because I'm working on something and I break it, or I didn't anticipate buying something at Home Depot. I was like, oh crap, now I gotta go back and get it, right? So then I had to like stop what I'm doing, go all the way to Home Depot, which is like 20 minutes away from me, right? Buy what I need at Home Depot, then call home all the way back home and can finish working on my project, right? I'm leaving the area of interest to go get a tool or a piece of material or something, right? That kills my workflow and slows me down. Same thing goes for us here in the 3D world, right? I want to stay in the area of interest. So here's a handy dandy power user trick. If you hold down the control key before you click on the tool handles with the rotate tool, so I'm holding it down, check it out. It snaps to 15-degree increments, which is pretty cool. In addition, if you really want to know numerically how many degrees you're rotating it, unfortunately I can't do it while I'm zoomed in, but I'll show you where it pops up in the interface. If you look right here while you're rotating objects, you'll see a little popover that says exactly the degree of rotation you're applying to your objects. Okay? Precision is always encouraged when working in the 3D modeling space. So if I hold down the control key, now I've snapped 15, now I snap 75. You see it down there, it says offset angle in the bottom left-hand corner of my viewport. Can you guys see that? Yeah, great. All right. Pretty cool, huh? Any other questions that kind of bubbled to the surface while you're working on your homework last week or your lab assignment this afternoon? Anything else? All right, cool. Well, let's do this. Now's a good time to take a small, simple little break. It is 12:44. 2:44, thank you. It's 2:44. Let's be back in here at 2:55, please, in 10 minutes. Okay? Let's take a small break. maybe. I love Disneyland. Huh? Kids, yeah, right?
So, because kids are there, their parents are going to be there, so they're like, I'm going to start with my dad, we won't watch my kids. Unless they bring their siblings with them.
Yeah. All right, let's get back together real fast, okay, guys? Because we got a lot to discuss this week, okay? Some new things, and of course, naturally, you're going to get some time in class to continue working on your homework in your lab. But let's just kind of talk about what our expectations are this week. Now, most of you have done a pretty great job of starting, if not almost finishing, the Parthenon. So spend another 30 minutes at max working on your Parthenon. Use some of the cloning stuff that we just talked about to really kind of fuel the creation of your model. And another 30 or 45 minutes, wrap that puppy up, render and submit both the Luxology project file and the rendered image to the Dropbox on Canvas, okay? Did anyone have any issues submitting their homework and their lab assignment that was due today? Okay, if you had some problems, find me after class or during a break. I want to make sure that those bumps in the road are ironed out before we go too much further. Our homework this week is our first kind of big model, okay? And as you can see from the assignment sheet, we're making a train this week. Woo! I love trains. Trains are great. Have you guys ever been to the train museum over here in town? It's a lot of fun. It's go check it out. It's an officially a California state park. It's awesome. It's an old town. Yeah. I have taken a ride on Amtrak. I love trains. I try to go on trains as much as I can. They're a lot of fun. But if you ever want to feel insignificant, go to the train museum. Because if you look at a picture, you almost forget how ginormous these machines are. And it puts into perspective, for me at least, as to what humanity is capable of creating. To see these, thousands of mechanical pieces all working together to make something go in a straight line. This is really quite remarkable, and I love going over there. Trains are a tremendous amount of fun for us to make, and we're going to make one. Now, we're not going to go crazy in the detail with our train. It's going to be pretty simple. It's going to be pretty basic. More on that in a minute. But I wanted to show you kind of what the expectations for this week's homework are. And on not every homework assignment, but a lot of homework assignments, I'm going to try to give you guys as many visuals as to what the goal for this assignment is, what you're trying to produce, okay? I've even gone as far as posting a real interactive 3D model of the final finished result right here in the homework page, which is pretty cool. I use a service called Sketchfab. You should go check it out. It's rad. It allows you to upload your 3D models to a service, and then you can embed an image. I hesitate to even call it an image. It's an interactive 3D model right here in a web browser, which is really kind of rad. So this is it. This is what we're making this week. We're making a low poly 3D train. Pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool. So that's our goal. Now, in order to get here, question?
I was using that app because a lot of similar controls to Modo.
Very similar. Yeah, very similar. Sketchfab and Modo are good friends. There's actually even an exporter that you can download for free from the Foundry's website that will allow you to export to Sketchfab in like one click. It's very cool. I definitely suggest you checking it out. It's a lot of fun. All right, so we're going to be making a train this week. And as we discussed earlier, what's the hardest part about 3D modeling is figuring out where to begin. Naturally, where a lot of people begin is, believe it or not, at the end. I'm just going to create a new, fresh project file. Let's check it out. Most people, they begin here. They have a vision, and the first thing that they try to build right off the bat is something that looks like this. Okay? This is what they try to build from scratch in moment one, right? Because we all want to get into it. We all want to get the final high quality, high resolution, super fantastic looking geometry as fast as we can. But that is building your foundation on sand, okay? We want to build our foundation on bedrock, on stone, okay? To ensure that our entire modeling process goes a little bit more smoother, okay? Now, this is the final finished train. This is the train that I made, okay, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Actually, I need to update this a little bit because it's getting showing a little bit of its age, okay? It's where did I begin in the process of making this train? Did I start modeling all the rivets and the bolts and the details and the wheels? Did I start there? No, because that'd be really, really tough. Right now, you don't understand the proportion and the volume that your polygons need to participate within, okay, they need to populate inside of your scene. We need to do some shape deconstruction. We need to find the simple shapes first, and then we can explore the form and the volume and the general shape of our terrain with very simple building blocks. Now, I'm going to challenge you this week and every single week to do something that very few of us would like to do, okay? And that's return to kindergarten. I love kindergarten. Me loves the kindergarten. I wish I could hang out with kindergartners all day long. Scratch that. I have a kindergartner at home, not all day long, but they are a really fun crowd to hang out with. And have you ever been to a kindergarten class? Man, they're just like, it is. I wish I could be a kindergarten teacher, man. That'd be a whole lot of fun. Yeah.
I got a question. Like, how do I save this?
So file save.
Okay, just
Yep.
save and, like,
Is it the image or the project file?
it's at Parthion or
Yeah, good. Just file save. Yep.
just save it like that?
Just like that. Kindergartners are pretty magical because they don't have a lifetime of experiences filtering and influencing their thought process, right? They work at a level where their creativity is just unhooked and unhinged from society. And something that I hate to say that I've seen for myself and a lot of other people, and this is something that's been studied, is that being creative is almost beat out of us at a very early age, right? Yeah, thanks to our school systems for the most part and an unrealistic expectation imposed by adults, right? Is that we try to almost limit our child's creativity because we value academic performance and getting better test grade, scores and all that jazz ahead of being able to draw a picture, okay? But for kindergartners, they haven't had that experience yet, right? They haven't had it beat out of them. They haven't had their creativity and their enthusiasm schooled away from them like we have, okay? So their imagination runs wild. And I see it every single day when I go home, where a simple Coke bottle flying through the air turns into a spaceship. A stack of blocks turns into a building. A simple little Dorito box or Dorito bag turns into a parachute for an army man. It's amazing how our children think and see in the abstract. Okay? I want you guys to return to that world. I want you to return to a world where what you have in front of you are basic building blocks. Okay? And that's the goal this week, is to take basic shapes and stack them on top of each other, as if we're building with Legos. Okay? Because if we take a step back and look at our train here, it seems, whoa, super complex and super challenging and super difficult. But if we just go back to Legos, and the idea that we're just stacking simple bricks on top of each other, we can see pretty quickly that this train is really nothing more than a whole series of what? Simple shapes, cylinders and rectangles. That's all it really is. The smokestacks on the top of the train, cylinders. The wheels, cylinders that have just been pressed this way. The little house cabin thing are a whole bunch of rectangles just stacked on top of each other, just like we would build if we were working with Legos. Okay? That is the goal this week, is to build something complex from something very, very simple. And through this process, we'll begin to learn to develop our spatial reasoning skills, how to build something in 3 dimensions. It is a challenge, okay, that will take weeks and weeks and weeks of practice. That challenge begins today, okay? It's amazing how much we can make from simple building blocks, okay? 100% of the image that you see here was made by rectangles and cylinders just moved, scaled, and rotated on top of each other. I didn't use any fancy duplication tools or any slicing tools to allow me to punch holes in things. I just took rectangles, moved and rotated. Cylinders, squished, moved and rotated. That's it. That's the totality of the skill that was required to make the image that you see here today. Okay? And that's what we're going to do. But we also need to remember our practice a little bit. Okay? Good 3D modelers build the foundation of their mesh from reference. Okay? We're master observers, as you were a moment ago when you did the Parthenon. Hopefully many of you guys went to the internet and started looking at pictures of the Parthenon to help give you guys some clues as to what the Parthenon was going to look like. Okay? We are so blessed to have this wonderful visual encyclopedia literally at our fingertips, because now we really can go back in time, go around the world, and visit a far-off distant planet whenever we want, okay? It allows us to build from reality, and that's our job, right? As 3D modelers, it's our big responsibility to recreate reality. I'm putting reality in finger quotes, right? Because it could be the reality of the Parthenon, a building of thousands of years ago, or the reality of some far-off distant planet, right? It could be, the reality of the new stuff coming out in the cool Star Wars film that's about to drop in a couple months, okay? It could be that reality. But it's our job as the modeler to physically build it. We always, always, always want to start with pictures as much as we can, okay? Starting from today, you're almost always, except for a couple projects at the end of the semester, going to be provided some reference images. And your expectation is to build those models, okay, or that shape. As 3D modelers, we're almost never, and this I'm gonna pop a bubble right now, we're almost never going to be building stuff for us, okay? We're almost never going to be building our designs or our models. Of course, we'll be able to influence what it looks like, but they're almost always going to be created, the design that is, by someone else, okay? Maybe we're working down at Industrial Light and Magic. I know for a fact they're working at a fever pace right now to get all the visual effects and animation for the next Star Wars film wrapped up here in the next, 6-8 weeks. With the December 15th, I think, release date for the next Star Wars film. Here it is, beginning of September. Yeah, they're going to probably wrap up all of their visual effects and animation work by mid-October, so they can go into sound mixing and duplication and get into theaters by mid-December, okay? If you're lucky enough to work on those crews, of course, you're going to be working with inside this wonderful production team, but the pre-production artists, the concept designers, are going to be the guys and gals that are physically responsible for making, like, the next X-Wing starfighter design, right? Because, like George Lucas, if he was the director, right, George Lucas would work with those artists, and they would collaborate and work very closely together, trying to figure out how it's going to look, right? They'd do everything in 2D, because designing things in 2D is a whole lot easier than designing things in 3D, right? I mean, you're going to appreciate that statement at the end of the semester. But then at the end of their production process, George Lucas was infamous about this. He actually had a rubber stamp that said approved, and then it had his name underneath it. And he would go around to all the designs in the art department, and he'd say, okay, that's what I want the Millennium Falcon to look like, approved. And then they'd take that piece of concept drawing, and they'd hand it to someone like me and say, okay, this is the picture that George wants you to make in 3D. And I go, yes, sir, ma'am, and I'm off to the races. So I'm almost always making someone else's 3D model, and we have to. And George is expecting me to produce what he approved, not like my own version of it or a flavor of it. No, he wants that thing. Okay, he wants that Millennium Falcon or that Parthenon or that basic train model. Okay, so we need to use reference as the foundation for every single thing that we do. Ideally, it'd be great if we could bring that reference imagery into Modo, and we can use it as a tracing guide. And that's the goal. If you return to your assignment sheet real fast, under the resources section in the page, check it out. I think it's, here we go. Under resources, I've given you guys a reference image. If you click on it and download the link, mine got saved to the downloads folder, so let's put it on my desktop and unarchive it real fast. Here is our reference image, okay? This is called an orthographic reference image. If you look very simply at this picture, artistically, what don't you see? 3D or perspective, right? This is not an image that was taken with a camera. Think of it like a blueprint, okay, or a technical schematic. If we have an orthographic view, a drawing of the object, we can bring that into Modo and use it as the foundation for our model, okay? Now, is this cheating? No, it's not cheating at all. A lot of folks think, like, oh, Pat, you want me to trace something? And I go, uh-huh. Yeah, that's exactly what I want you to do. I want you to take this image, bring it into Modo, and trace all the shapes, okay? As a 2D artist, that's something that's been beat out of you, right? Every art class you've ever taken is, don't trace someone else's work, right? Because then you're just copying. Well, we're not trying to copy. We're trying to recreate something that already exists, okay? Naturally, it's going to change and become your own as we continue to go through the 3D modeling pipeline. But initially, we want to create the foundation based from reference. Okay? It's going to be easier, faster, and more accurate if we use these orthographic images as the foundation for our geometry. So let's bring this stuff into Modo and start building our train, because there's a couple of big ideas that are going to be really helpful for you guys as you start to go through this process. Okay? All right, so I'm going to close down the preview here and cruise back over into Modo. And let's talk about how we can import this image in. Now, when we're importing images into Modo, it's really, really important that we understand what we're creating and how this image is going to be a participant of this new special creation. I want to use this image that I've supplied to you as a backdrop item. It's going to be a non-renderable, invisible item in your scene. We're only going to see it in the modeling views, or in the viewport, excuse me. Okay? Let's create one real fast. So it's an item. I want to get rid of my demo scene from earlier. Okay, so check it out. In order for us to create a backdrop item, we're going to go to the screen right part of our interface into the item list. And if you look very carefully inside of this environment, of course, we've got that big button at the top that says Add Item. And to its right, we have a small white triangle. If we click on that white triangle, the disclosure arrow is going to produce a contextual menu. And boom, there it is, baby, backdrop item. That's what we're after. We're going to add a backdrop item into our scene. Let's be good stewards of our scene. This week we're only going to have one backdrop item, but in weeks to come we'll have 3 or 4. So naming these backdrop items is probably a really great idea. Yes, sir.
So how do I get? I'm having trouble with my computer. Like, I was gonna ask about like how do I since I saved my my earlier project, but how do I get to do the other one?
Yeah, it looks like Modo's crashed for you because you got that beach ball, right? So if you right-click on the icon down in the dock, the Modo icon, yeah, right-click on it. Choose Force Quit. Yeah, and then relaunch the application and start back again. All right. So let's keep cruising here. I'm going to rename my backdrop item just by clicking on it again. And I want to put ref in here. I always put ref as short for reference. Okay. I'm basically telling my 2 a.m. brain, okay, because all bad things happen to your project file when you're modeling at 2 a.m. So protect yourself and protect your model at 2 a.m. when you're not thinking clearly. Okay. I always tell my 2 a.m. brain this is a reference item and this is the train from the side. Okay? Set the enter key, the return key in our keyboard, and start to look at what's been created. Now, all backdrop items, every single one, is going to be initially created where? At the origin, so look for it there. If you don't see your backdrop item at the origin, hit the A key, and it will auto-fit your scene and automatically zoom in. A for auto-fit. Good keyboard shortcut to commit to memory. All righty, rats. With my backdrop item visible in my scene, you can see that it's just kind of an empty little white square. Let's get something in there. Specifically, I want to place that picture inside of my backdrop item. If we return once again to our backdrop item properties on the right, and I'm going to just collapse the transform section here. Check it out. We have an image well here. This is where we want to load in that image we saved from the website. So I click on the word that says none, and you're going to see what is called inside of Modo the clip browser. And really, it's just a fancy navigation environment for images. Yes, sir?
Would we click to go to add item or whatever?
So you've already done it. Yep, you've added the backdrop item. Okay. I'm down here.
Okay.
Yep. I really wish they wouldn't call it the clip browser. I wish they would just call it like the image browser. That'd be a little bit easier for everyone to understand. However, what we need to do is load in the image that we saved from the website, right? So under the Add Clip pull-down menu in the clip browser, we're going to choose Load Image. Load image, not new image. We don't want to create one. We want to load an existing one. load image, and then we're going to find in our Finder application where we saved that computer, or excuse me, where we've saved and stored that image inside of our computer. And mine just happens to be on the desktop, so I'll open it, and then boom, load image. There's our train. Ah, awesome. Okay. Pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool. So now we have that image inside of Modo. And don't worry, this is never going to render. Backdrop items by definition don't render. So the only time you're going to see this image is inside the viewport, which makes it excellent for us to use as a tracing guide. Okay? All right. So once we load in our backdrop item, there are really two things that we need to do before we can start modeling. So if you're starting to draw shapes, stop, pause, rewind, okay? We have to make sure there's a couple things that we have in tow perfectly set before we're able to model, okay? This is the part that people want to gloss over and run through, but it's the most important part about working with backdrop images because we're literally setting the foundation for the rest of the model. If you skip it and get too excited about making the model of your train, you're going to spend more time editing your train than you will creating your train, okay? So there's a couple things in here that we need to do. First and foremost, we need to orient, which is the fancy word for rotate, this backdrop item to our three-dimensional scene. Now, last week and the week before, we talked about some basic landmarks inside of our three-dimensional scene that our models need to kind of adhere to. And you probably remember me standing up here at the T-pose. If I was modeling a character, I need to make sure that the face or the nose of my character is facing a very specific direction. What is that direction? Forward, right? It needs to be facing the front. How do we define the front? Bum, bum, bum. Yes, absolutely. The z-axis is responsible for front and back. Which side of the z-axis is going to be the front? The positive side, okay? All right, so the positive side of the z-axis is the front of our scene. I want the picture now, and specifically the details of our picture, to be facing the front of our scene. So in the picture now, where's the front of the train? What's the front? Yeah, it'd be this stuff over here. Does anyone know what that's called, by the way? I love this little part of transportation history. This little thing. Does anyone know what that's called? It's a scooper. No, yeah, it's the cattle guard or the cattle pusher. Let that sink in for a moment. It's the cattle guard or cattle pusher. So the whole idea is that this thing pushes the cow off of the track, which I think is like, what? Poor cow, right? He's just sitting there eating some grass. Next thing you know, he's getting pushed out of the way. Anyways, all right. So I want the front of my train facing the front of my scene, and I apologize. Yeah, exactly. I guess that's the choice, right? Yeah. All right, so by looking at the grid inside of Modo's 3D space, is the front of my train facing the correct way? What squares?
The grid line, how do we do that?
Oh, it's already on for yours. I just turned the grid on. Yeah, I turned it off, and I'm turning it back on. So if you're following along, look at your screen. Which way is the train facing? Yes, and you're absolutely right. How do you know that? Yes, I like it. Specifically, if you look at the compass in the lower left-hand corner of your viewport, it tells you precisely the current orientation of the X, Y, and Z axis. And as a reminder, I always think of these little lines here as gigantic arrows, right? They're pointing towards the positive side of the x-axis. If I zoom out and look at my train, we can see that it's actually facing towards the negative x, okay? It's facing screen left, and screen left is towards the negative side of the x-axis. In addition, you can also look at the little badges at the boundaries of your grid to give you a little bit more granular information as to which direction your train is facing. It says negative x. It's facing negative x, so it's facing the wrong way. Before we rotate our backdrop item, let me show you a great little trick that the developers at the Foundry have put in the application for us. It's cool because the developers down at the Foundry are 3D modelers and animators themselves, so they understand our thought process and the workflow that we need to go through when working with backdrop images. And they've given us a really great series of options under the backdrop item that will allow us to orient this object correctly. Check it out. Once again, I'm going to return to my backdrop item, click on it to get all my properties, and where we're looking now is this projection type. Okay? This projection type does two things. First and foremost, it's going to filter which 3D viewport this image is going to show up in. Okay? By default, all backdrop items are going to show up in every perspective view of our 3D scene. Okay? I'm in a perspective view. I can orbit around and check it all out. In addition, if I look in the top left-hand corner of my viewport, it says perspective right there. Okay, that's what we're after, perspective. However, the projection type option for my backdrop image is also going to allow us to view this image exclusively in another view. Okay? The default is front, as you can see from the backdrop items, front. If I change my view from perspective to front, what are you expecting to see here? The train. Okay, there's the train, the picture of the train. If I was to change my view once again to like right, what don't you see? The train. Okay? The projection type option is going to determine its orientation in the 3D scene, and it's going to filter which viewport or which view of our 3D scene this image is going to show up on. We actually want this, okay? Because when I'm looking at my scene from the right, I only want to see the image of the train from the right. If I had a secondary backdrop item in my scene that captures the train from a top view, what would I need to change that projection type to? Top, so that when I'm looking at my scene from the top, I just see the top picture.
Click on front right. On the right here.
You got it. All right. Let's return to perspective for a second and make some changes to the projection type. Here's the big takeaway. Okay? You want to make sure that the projection type of the backdrop image matches the perspective that's captured in the picture, right? So what is the perspective that's captured in our backdrop item's picture? Where are we looking at our train from? Kind of like the side, right? We're not seeing the front of the train in the picture. We're not seeing the top of the train in the picture. We're seeing the side of the train in the picture. So which projection type here makes the most sense? Here's a list of all of them. Yeah, left or right. Absolutely. Now, I don't know which one it is. One of these two is going to work fine for what we're trying to do. I'm going to choose right, just because it's the first one on the list. Now, the moment I do this, watch what happens. Projection type to right. What does the computer automatically do for us? It rotates it. Okay? Let's travel over to the right view of our three-dimensional scene and look a little bit more closely at what the computer has done for us. Whoop. Aha, yes, there it is. Good. A second ago, this image was only showing up in the front. Now it's showing up in the right view, or the correct view of our three-dimensional scene. Yeah?
What should I clicked on right, but it's not showing up?
Yeah, that's right. And that's exactly what should be happening. Because now it's only going to show up when we're looking at our scene from the right. We're looking at our scene from the front. Hit the A key, it's there. You're just so far zoomed out. There you go. All right. So we've now taken one small step forward to to getting this correctly aligned and oriented inside of our three-dimensional scene. The image is oriented along the z-axis, and all right. But is the train still facing the right way? No. It's facing negative z. Look carefully. Okay? Here's the cattle pusher. It's facing negative z. It says so on the grid. In addition, if we look at our compass in the lower left, the arrow that points to the positive z is going the opposite direction, right? So what do we need to do to get this to work correctly? Flip it. Absolutely. And luckily for us, the developers down at the Foundry have given us this option. and I'm simply going to flip the image. Boink. And now it's facing the right way. So the first step when working with backdrop items inside of Modo is to orient each image to our scene, okay, as we've done here. Yes, sir?
Why couldn't it be just in the beginning when we have that image just rotated? Like what's the advantage of doing?
The advantage is that projection type of filtering which viewport this image is going to show up in. Because what I want to do is that I want to come over to the right view of my scene and very accurately place my geometry to match the location of the wheels or the fuselage, for example. Okay? If that projection type is set to front, it's never, never, ever going to show up in the correct view of my scene. Yeah?
What are those circle ones when you put, when you put the flip for the check mark, what is the circle one next to it?
So what you're talking about, I think, that little dot,
Yes.
that is the Modo convention for adding a keyframe. Yeah, if I wanted to keyframe this value and animate its flip, that's where I'd go to start that process. Well, this wouldn't be, and I could never imagine why you'd want to animate the backdrop item flipping, but you can.
Going back to my original question, when you put a backdrop in there, its default is the projection type front.
You got it.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So now that we have oriented our backdrop item to the scene, let's start orienting it and aligning it to the grid. Okay? We want to try to make our job as 3D modeler as easy as we can. Okay? So look at the picture for a second. What are we going to be expected to build inside of this project? Whole bunch of cylinders and rectangles. What make the train, the coal car, all the railroad ties. I'm looking at U-clone tool to do that. Okay, the railroads themselves. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff in here, and it's all going to be sitting on top of those railroad tracks. Now, one of the important things that we have to establish as 3D modelers is the correct placement of this object inside of our three-dimensional scene. We know that we want all of our geometry to be modeled at the origin, right? But we don't need everything to be centered at the origin. We just need it to be at the origin. It'd be helpful for our animators, or if we're trying to take this asset over into a game engine, that maybe the railroad tracks be sitting on the ground, which is the center of the y-axis, right? If we were to zip back over into our perspective view, that's where the grid sits. Let's go back into perspective. See where the grid sits? I know it's really hard to see on the projector, and for that I apologize. I'm talking about this faded grid. That's a representation of the center of the y-axis, the ground. Okay? I want my train to be modeled and placed on the ground, right? Because that's the logical place for it to go, right? So what we can do, and what I would recommend that you do, is change the location of your backdrop item so that the features of the railroad tracks are sitting on the ground. Let's return to the right view. And here's what I need to do. I basically need to select my backdrop item and move it up. Let's move it. But man, it's really kind of hard. It's really hard to see where the grid is in relationship to those important features. Yes, sir?
For some reason I can't find my train.
Hit the A key.
Nothing.
Okay. Your projection type is set to front.
Oh.
Change it to right. There it is. Yes.
What do we do to zoom in or whatever we did?
I'm sorry, say again?
What do we do after? What do we do now?
Okay, so yeah, so if you look at what's going on here, I'm trying to move my picture up so that I can align, like, I don't know, there's the center of the y-axis up there. I need to take this here and put it up, but it's kind of hard to see those grid lines with this picture in the way, right? It'd be helpful if we could make this transparent so that we can see through the image to the grid lines behind it. That'd be pretty cool. Once again, if we return to our backdrop item properties, the developers of the Foundry have done us a solid, and they've given us a transparency amount. I'm going to put this at 70. Then I'll zoom out and hit the return key. Yeah, You probably can see this a little bit more easily on your screen, but now I can see through. I've made this backdrop item transparent, and I can see the grid indicator lines behind it. And I can place this object with accuracy inside of my three-dimensional scene. So I'll fire off the move tool once again. I'm just going to move it up until, somewhere right around in there. That's good enough for me. Aha, awesome sauce. I like that. Okay. So step number one when working with backdrop items is that we orient it to the environment, to the scene. Then we place the images correctly to the grid. Okay? We're going to continue to grow in our experience with working with backdrop items. Almost every single project is going to get a backdrop item. This is an invaluable skill for us to learn going forward. Okay? Okie dokie. So now that we got everything kind of dialed and ready to go, let's start making some geometry. Okay? So where do we begin?
Origin.
Correct answer. Yes, we always begin at the origin. But what part of the train do we begin with? Yeah, absolutely the biggest thing. Because the biggest component of the train is going to help us figure out the spatial relationships and proportions of all the other little things. Okay? Now, we got a big challenge in front of us, right? Because we need to fill in the blanks a little bit. This backdrop image only gives us reference from the side. How wide is our train? I don't know. Okay? I really don't know. That's for us and our creative brain to figure out. So at times, we get a tremendous amount of information, but it's always our responsibility to fill in the blanks. The more reference pictures you have at your disposal, the more accurate you're going to be. I wish I had my project file for this very train with me. You'd see literally probably about 200 different pictures of this train that I found through my detective skills on Google, okay? Because the more pictures I have, the better it is, and I'm going to understand all the literal pieces that I'm going to have to craft for this model. If you return to the assignment sheet on Canvas, I've given you, this little 3D model here. I mean, that does a great job of helping you figure out the width of a lot of this stuff. In addition, the 3 small thumbnail images will help you out figure out the width as well. All right. So I'm going to start with the big pieces. Let's start with the boiler, the big light blue centered block in the middle of the locomotive itself. That's a good place to begin because a lot of other things connect onto it. So that's an important critical piece that we establish early on in the process of making our train. What tool am I going to use to flush out the basic shape of my boiler? Cylinder tool, right? Yeah, rock and roll. Simple shapes. Everything on this object is going to be created with cylinders, and rectangles. All right, so let's do it real fast. I'm going to fire off my cylinder tool. Side of 24, one segment. All right, there it is. So there's my first cylinder. Now, often when we're building things in 3D, it's going to be placed, maybe incorrectly inside of our scene. Do I need to delete this cylinder? No, just because it's facing the wrong way doesn't mean it's a throwaway piece. We just need to correct it. We need to edit its location.
Yeah, the size is just 1.
Size needs to be 24. Segments are 1.
Okay.
I want to go over into my polygonal selection set so that I can begin to rotate this thing around. Now, earlier we talked about some strategies on how we can rotate with accuracy. What are 2 strategies that we can rotate this 2 strategies that we can use to rotate this thing precisely 90 degrees along its y-axis? Holding control, great way to quickly do it. Yes, sir.
How do I switch it on? Make it a
Yeah, go into perspective and grab that center dot. Yes, sir.
I'm getting this error when trying to click cylinder, it says no active mesh in the scene.
So if you get that error, no active mesh, that means at one point in your modeling process, you were in item mode, okay, and you selected your mesh like I have here, and then you hit the delete key. Yeah. Yeah, well, no, this is what you need to have, is that you need to have a mesh item, okay? If it says no active mesh item in your scene, return to your add item pull-down menu, the little white arrow will give you the drop down, and there it is, mesh, right there.
Okay.
Yeah, we always need to have a mesh item for geometry to be placed within. Yeah, Domingo.
The selector is this one, right?
Yep. All right. Let me remake that cylinder real fast. And get out of item mode and into polygon modes. So as we were just mentioning, one easy way to rotate this thing 90 degrees is to hold down the control key while you click on the handle. It'll snap to 15-degree increments. I love that. That's a great fast way of working. What's another way that you could do this? What's another way that we can very quickly and accurately rotate this object 90 degrees? So I got the rotation tool on. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. I've zoomed in to the channel box. Okay, we just manually enter in the numeric rotation value. Okay?
The rotation X is the Y and Z.
That's right. Yep. I'm going to rotate mine 90 degrees around the around the Y axis to get it face where I want it to go. All right. Now this shape, if you look very carefully, this shape is way offset from the origin of my scene. My backdrop item is at the origin and my shape is way far away. Is there a method that we could use to get my cylinder a little bit closer and, more importantly, centered around the origin of my scene? Someone began to say it and you got scared. You're absolutely right. Center selected. Yeah, okay. The center selected command is a fantastic way for us to very quickly get things positioned around the origin. I'm going to do center selected, all. And watch what happens. There it goes, right down there at the origin. Now I can spend the rest of my time looking at my scene from the right and placing and aligning this cylinder where it needs to go. Okay?
On the center selector tool, you click all.
All, yep. Yes, ma'am. Yes, quick way to change views. This is my favorite Moto keyboard shortcut, okay? Because going up to the button is a pain to change views. Hold down Control, Spacebar. You get the pie menu, okay? And then you can choose which scene or which view of your scene you want to kind of load in. Perspective, right? It's awesome. And you don't even have to click on it. Just got to put your cursor so that it's highlighted, and then just let go of your keys, and it will automatically load that in. I don't even think about it anymore. It's so automatic to me. After a while, you'll memorize the positions of all the views in the pie menu. All right, let's travel over to the right view of my scene and continue to position this little boiler in relationship to the reference. Okay, so I'm going to use the Move tool. And man, this thing is gigantic. So what do I need to do? Yeah, scale it down. Okay, run the scale tool. Now I'm going to scale uniformly. And now I'm looking at the diameter of my cylinder to what my reference tells me. And I'm just moving and rotating. Yeah, there we go. And that's pretty close. I'm happy with that. Okay, and this is the power and the purpose of these backdrop items. If I was to try to figure out that on my own, I may still be working. This tells me exactly where it needs to go. It is our grand blueprint, our guide. I need to make it a little bit longer, so I'll return to the perspective view of my scene, and I'm just going to grab that backmost polygon and move it to the back where the cabin is going to need to be, somewhere right around in there. It's pretty sweet.
And how you just did that, there's no way of doing that on that right perspective just because it's 2D, so you can't go out that line.
You actually can. What I did, I flipped over into perspective, selected the polygon, and then returned to my right view. So this is kind of what I did. I grabbed it, and then I went back into my right view. You can just barely see it. If you look ever so carefully, you'll see a 1-pixel orange line. You do get a small kind of visualization that something is selected. And then if you just run the Move tool now, the tool handles will kind of confirm that. Oops, I'm all zoomed in, so it's going crazy. But now I can move that polygon wherever I want to go. You can technically select that polygon from the right view. It's kind of tricky, but you can do it. If you do a middle mouse click, middle mouse drag, get a box. I just selected that front polygon. See? Do it again on this for the back one. Middle mouse button, drag out a box. I grab that back row verts. So you can select it.
Okay.
Yeah, if you know what you're doing, it's not impossible.
And what's that tool you're using to change perspective easily?
Control spacebar. Control spacebar. You'll get this lovely pie menu. Yeah. Yeah, if there's one pie menu to commit to memory, it's control spacebar. Everyone do it real fast, okay? Just get used to doing it. Control spacebar. Yes?
So I pressed control spacebar and it got rid of the image or something else. Should I proceed?
Okay, let's see what you got.
Should I proceed?
Sure. Okay. I don't know. Control spacebar is just going to bring open a pie menu. Okay, stop. Okay, let's check it out. Here's your backdrop item. Its projection type is left. Put it to right. There you go.
And then do that.
Okay. Where's your cursor?
This?
Yeah, there you go. Now do control spacebar.
Oh,
There it is. Yeah.
okay.
Yep. You got to hold it down. All right. Okie dokie. Okie dokie, artichoke. So this backdrop item is going to be a big, big help for us in plotting out and planning where all these pieces need to go. It's going to be your job to figure out the spatial relationships between all these different cylinders and squares in our three-dimensional scene. Now, if your viewport doesn't look like mine, okay, let me show you something. This is actually kind of important. If you look very, very carefully inside of my viewport, see how I can see the back side of my cylinder through the image? See how I see all this side? Now, if yours is cut off and you only see the front side of the cylinder, here's a really, really important viewport property that you need to change. And you may have to do this if you go over into the design lab, because who knows what those folks are doing over there, okay? Hit the O key on your keyboard, which is going to bring open your viewport properties. And specifically, we need to go into the drawing and control section of our viewport properties. There's two things that we need to turn on. Okay, I've turned them off just real fast so you can see what we're working with. See how I no longer can see the back side of my cylinder through the image? Yeah.
What do we click on?
Huh?
What do we click on?
Hit the O key on your keyboard. So hit the O key on your keyboard, you'll bring open your viewport properties. And what we're looking to do is enable overlay drawing right here. Overlay drawing. Turn that on. And in addition, down under the background imagery category, also turn on overlay. So there's two overlays that you need to enable inside of this form. Bloop. And with those two turned on, ta-da, now we can see our mesh through the image, which is pretty cool. Okay, that's going to be really, really helpful when trying to figure out and place all these pieces of 3D geometry on inside of our scene. Coolio, huh? All right. So now we're free to start modeling the rest of our train using simple little building blocks. Okay. Now, for example, the back of the train here, we have some platforms that we'll need to craft. The right view of our scene is going to be very helpful in the creation and the understanding of where all these pieces of geometry need to go. I just fired open the rectangle tool. I'm going to very carefully grab the red indicator, okay? Now, okay, so let's talk about this. I've just added a new shape. When I was in the right view, I drew its shape. I just traced its size with the rectangle tool. But upon inspection of that shape in the 3D view, we've run into a small major problem. It's not centered at the origin of the scene. So what's my next step here? Center it. Okay? Now, if we were to center it as is, and we chose center selected all, like we did before, what's going to happen to its alignment to the backdrop item? Yep. It's going to go dead. It's going to go to the origin of the scene. The feature that we just traced, is it at the origin of the scene? No. So we need to center along a single axis now versus all three. So we need to center along the X so that we preserve its placement to the backdrop item. Bloop. There we go. Haha. Excellent. Me like you. That's starting to look pretty great. And this is where me as an artist really have to come in and start establishing the dimensions of our three-dimensional shape. We got to figure out, cylinders are easy, right? The square is the hard part. And you got to use your brain, got to use your eyeballs and physically see what it is that you're crafting and creating in front of you. Okay? That's pretty awesome. Now the back of the cabin here, this is where it gets kind of fun. How are we going to create that? Interesting thought, right? How are we going to create the cabin that has a window and openings in them? How would you do it if you had a bucket of Legos in front of you? Hmm?
What would you put right there?
Yeah.
What would it do?
Move and rotate and scale it.
Okay.
Piece by piece.
I'm sorry, say again?
Piece by piece, like big piece bottom and big piece.
I love it. Yes, absolutely. Big pieces at the bottom, some thin pieces to make the pillars to represent the window frames. Absolutely. We're stacking blocks on top of blocks. Okay? Other questions? Everyone feeling it so far? Yes, sir.
I'm just having trouble. I'm having trouble like trying to get like this block into
Which block?
this one to get like
Okay, so first things first, you got to go to polygon mode, right? Hit OK. And you have a tool on, so let's turn the tool off. There you go. Now select the shape. I'd even double click on it, then move, rotate, and scale it into position. Okay. So one other thing that we should spend some time talking about today, because there's a lot of creating, then moving and rotating and scaling. You're going to move, rotate, and scale probably 1,000 times to create this project, okay? If you see it in the reference image, I want you to make it. So I'm really looking for you to individually make all the railroad ties, okay? Clone tool, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Otherwise, it'd be a lot of copy, paste, move, all that jazz, okay? Yeah, if you see it in the image, I want you to build it in geometry, okay? This is a puzzle. This is not going to be something that's as straightforward as last week's. Now I'm asking you to use your spatial reasoning skills to really understand the placement of these simple shapes inside of 3D, okay? One of the things that I would really recommend that you strive to do at every opportunity, you make something, then turn off the visibility of your backdrop item and look at the sculpture. Look at what you're crafting, okay? Sometimes having that backdrop item in there really occludes your understanding of what it is that you've created. Turn the backdrop image off and just look, okay? And if something's not right, go into polygon selections mode, double click on the chunk that you need to move, and then move, rotate, and scale it, okay? You're the builder here, okay? You're making this train from simple building blocks, okay? The computer's not going to help you. I've shown you everything as far as the technology goes that you need to know to master the tool set. Now you have to start applying it, and that's where it gets a little tricky. All right, one final thing, and then I'll let you guys get back to work on your homework in your lab. Color. If you want to go in and start applying and adding some simple colors into your scene, I think that's a great thing. Please note, however, we're going to have an entire day on this, okay? I don't think it's next week. I believe it's the week after, where we spend all day really focusing on the rendering side of working inside of Modo. So we're going to come back and revisit this entire conversation again in the not too distant future. Okay? However, let's start looking at how we can apply simple materials inside of our scene. To help me out, I think what I'm going to do real fast is just create some cylinders. Give me a little smokestacky guys. I'm going to center it. Let's get those into position, because that will be really helpful. I'm going to grab that topmost polygon and move it up. There we go. So now I have the first little smokestack already kind of established. I'm going to copy and paste that smokestack, move it over here. So now I have two. Let's scale it up so it matches the diameter of the backdrop item. Somewhere right about in there is pretty good. And of course I need to make it smaller, so I'll select that top polygon and move it down. All right, so there's my little smokestacks. There we go. Now, adding color to our polygons is really easy. What we're going to be creating is called a material. And like everything inside of Modo, it begins and ends with a selection. Okay? So I'm going to be creating a couple simple little materials here. I'll start with the boiler, the main fuselage of my train. Of course, I got to go into my polygonal selection state. You have to do this in polygons, by the way. I'm already inside of my polygonal selection state. And if I double-click on the boiler of my object, it becomes selected. The keyboard shortcut that you need to remember is the M key, M for mama, or material. Okay? The M key is going to allow us to create and assign a new material to the selected polygons. Hitting the M key will give you this popover. It's called polygon set material, and here's the part that everyone messes up the first time. Okay, it's kind of like the Matrix. No one makes their first jump. Okay, we have to change the name of the material from default to something that's representative of the color we're about to apply. So like blue. Okay, but we can't have it be named default. Okay, it's got to be something new. So I'll call this blue, and then I'll go down a couple rows to my color picker here and find a lovely shade of blue. How about aqua? I love my colored pencils, by the way. There we go. And then simply hit OK. We'll apply the material to select the polygons, and now they're blue. Whee! This will show up in the render, by the way. Okay? Let's do it one more time. I want my little smokestacks over here to be yellow. So again, I'll select them. What's the keyboard shortcut? M. M for material. And then now, of course, I'm going to change it from blue to yellow. Give it a good color. How about, not lemon, how about banana? And there we go. Now, check this action out. What if I want to recycle a color that I've already used? I don't need to make a new one. I need to select it from the pull-down list. Okay, so I'm on to this one now. Maybe I want these two smokestacks to be the exact same color. Well, I can do that to, once again, select, hit the M key. But now I'm not going to create a new material, so I don't need to make it like yellow 2 or something else like that, right? I can just select it from the pull-down menu. Okay, so this is the original blue material that I created a second ago. Here's the yellow one. See, it even loads it in. Just select yellow and hit OK. And you can see that that second smokestack is now yellow as well. Okay? Yes, sir.
What we do again to make it like this we did with the cylinder?
I'm sorry, say again?
You see how we put that cylinder like that 3D or something? And from being that object?
I don't think I quite follow.
You know how we put that in the center and the object got put right there?
Uh-huh.
How would we do that to the
Yeah,
square?
so center selected. Select it, right? Double click on the square. Center selected along the x-axis, for sure.
And then do what? I clicked it already and
Did you do center selected?
like this?
Okay, and then go to center selected over in your toolbar.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Click X.
X.
And that's it.
All right, so if we go and over to our render environment, hit the A key, See how those colors persist? Okay. So when we hit the M key and we start applying these materials, now we're actually shading the polygons into something that will be preserved in the final render itself. Okay. You can use whatever color scheme you want for this. You don't have to use the blues and the oranges and the yellows that I've produced inside of my render. If you want your train to be, you know, green or pink, have fun with it. I really don't care. You know, just give it some simple colors. You start creating the muscle memory of hitting that, of selecting some geometry and hitting that M key. Okay, it really is very, very helpful. Believe it or not, it's kind of amazing to think that most of 3D modeling, not most, but a lot of it is muscle memory. Okay. All right, questions on some of the stuff that we've talked about today? Yes, sir.
Yeah, to get the color blue, just put the polygon tag as blue and it'll turn blue.
And you got to make sure that you set the color value in there's a color picker that shows up, right? See? Got to make sure that you change the color right here. Yeah. All right. One of the things that I've added for you inside of the Week 3 module on Canvas are a whole series of really great video tutorials that I think would be helpful, okay? Again, this is like a video encyclopedia. Use it as reference, come back to it. There's stuff in here that we haven't talked about yet, so if you want to go and watch all of them and learn more than what we talked about today, I say go for it, man, okay? I say go for it. But there's a lot, almost everything in here that we've talked about today is in a small little video inside of the Week 3 area of Canvas, okay? And of course, please leverage the power of the live streams on my YouTube channel. I'm about to stop the live stream. Was everyone able to find the live stream from last week? Yeah? Real easy? Great. Rock and roll. Okay, so it's about 4 o'clock. We got about 30 minutes left in class. Let's use the remainder of class time today to get a jump start on our homework and finish up our lab if we haven't finished it yet. Sound good? All right, let's get to work. 2 seconds, we'll stop the live stream.